Well, hello again, a very warm welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now we're taking a short break from my usual classic dirt bike videos to bring you more of those vintage motorcycles from the 2016 Bikes in the Park event held at Beveridge Park Kirkcaldy in Fife. Now this annual event was set up to commemorate 40 years of racing at this Beveridge Park location. And road racing actually began in 1948 here, and the last race event was held in 1988. So this country park in the middle of Kirkcaldy has a lot of history in motorcycle sport. Now we're going to start this part 2 video with a nice little BSA Bantam 175. Now I'm not entirely sure of the particular model of this bike, but I think it could be a D10, but of course don't quote me on that particular fact. But they did build huge numbers of these BSA Bantams back in the day, and I actually owned 1 or 2 of these bikes myself as a youngster. Now the motor of course was a German designed DKW engine, and these were great little power plants that were easy to work on, and you could get spare parts for these bikes very easily. Now also back in the day we used to turn these old BSA Bantams into schoolboy scramblers and go scrambling with these little Bantam motors. Just remove all the road going parts, including the old mudguards, lights, etc., and then put a set of high level mudguards on them, some knobbly tyres, and you could then just take one of these things racing. But they were fantastic little bikes, these BSA Bantams. Now okay, how many of you guessed what this particular bike is? Well, unfortunately it is not an MV Agusta, but an MV imitation, which has a Honda 750 4-cylinder motor in the frame. Now later in the video we'll be able to see and hear the real thing, but this particular motor is still a very nice looking machine, even though it is an imitation. But there is a chance that we will be able to get this thing fired up, and let's have a listen to this bike. Well, it certainly sounded the part, and quite a nice looking bike, that MV imitation, but we will be able to hear the real thing just later in the video. Now this selection of old Norton's BSAs, and I think there's an HIS in there. Now these would have been typical of the kind of machines that you would have seen racing around Beveridge Park in the 1950s and 60s. But you have to understand that Beveridge Park was not really a racetrack at all, but just the road that ran around the perimeter of the park. But riders used to come from all 4 corners of the UK and even Europe to race at this venue, and it drew huge crowds each time it was scheduled. But of course in this modern day, these kind of race events would never be allowed, especially around a public park. Although the Kirkcaldy Motorcycle Racing Club have chartered the history of this old race event in the many books that they've published about its life and times. But wouldn't it just be great to see these old Nortons, BSAs and HISs just have a blast around the course just one last time for old time's sake. But this very short selection of road racers is superb here with this big HIS motor. Looks like it's got a dry clutch, and as I mentioned, if you were to attend one of these race meetings at Beveridge Park way back in the day, then you would see many more of these style of old road racers winging their way around this Beveridge Park racetrack. But a nice little selection of bikes here. The bike on the left, I think, is a Triumph Trident. So we've got a Triumph Norton, an HIS and a BSA, so we've got a full British lineup. Okay, our next machine is, we have a very nice looking Triumph 21, or the Triumph 3TA to give it its full title. Now these 21s were Triumph's first unit construction twin cylinder motorcycles. Now the bike is a 350cc twin, of course, and this machine was another design by Triumph engineer Edward Turner. Now a 4-speed gearbox and that right hand gearbox shifter. Now when you speak about these Triumph 21s, no one seems to be able to decide the reason for the bike's title, and there are usually two explanations that are always bandied about. Now one school of thought says that it was to celebrate the 21st anniversary of Triumph's engineering, and the other says that it was actually done for the American export market, where the 21 cubic inches of the engine equates to the bike's 350cc motor. Now the completely enclosed rear ends on these Triumphs were the design of their day back in the 1950s, and were mainly to protect riders from the harsh British winter, but it was a bit of a pain when it came to doing maintenance because you had to remove all the panels. Other owners called these 21 3TAs the bathtub for obvious reasons, but in 1966 Triumph's final 3TA model got rid of all this extra metal. But despite that, this is still a legendary and iconic Triumph classic from the 1950s. Now this is another beautiful British classic. This is a 1959 HIS 650 twin. Now if memory serves me correctly, I do remember that these bikes were called the Model 31, but once again, don't quote me on any of these facts, and as I said, these road going classics are not my area of expertise, and I'm sure you'll be screaming at your screens if I'm wrong with my facts and figures. But you still have to admit that HIS built some lovely classic motorcycles over the years, and this 650 bike is again up there with the best of them. Now the motor is not unlike the Triumph Twins, but it's the combination again of that black painted frame and body panels and all the chrome and polished alloy that make these old British classics what they are. But there is certainly something about an old British classic motorcycle that other motorcycles from the same era just don't seem to possess. There is just something about these old British classics that make them very desirable for riders and collectors. And A.J. Stevens built some fantastic machines during their years of production, and this is another very rare and beautiful classic. And so hope you enjoyed that one. That's a 1959 HIS 650 model 31. Now the British classics just seem to keep coming now. This is another old British machine I captured on the day now. This is a 1958 Ariel NH 350 Red Hunter. Now this is another British classic, of course, a single cylinder 350cc bike with, I think these had a 4-speed gearbox, and if I'm right in assuming these also had a dry clutch as well. Now these bikes were also equipped with 6-volt electrics, and this particular bike still has its old Amal monoblock carburetor fitted, which is quite rare on one of these old British classics. Now this bike may take on the appearance that it's had its seat recovered, but this is exactly how this bike would have been when it left the factory way back in the day. Now I'm sure you don't need me to introduce this particular bike. It's almost unmistakably a beautiful, iconic British-made Manx Norton. Now this is a bike that was causing quite a bit of fuss over the course of the day, and just about everybody seemed to want to get a picture of this bike, including me, but it wasn't easy with all these crowds milling around. Now I know absolutely nothing about this bike, so I'm not going to haver on thinking that I do, but I'm sure all you Norton experts out there will just take one look at this bike and know everything about it in the smallest detail. And once again, this beautiful Norton would have been typical of the kind of bike that you would have seen racing around Beveridge Park if you attended these race events in the 1950s and 60s, but an absolutely gorgeous looking British classic. Okay, now we're going to get one or two of these old classics fired up, and we're going to kick off with this beautiful BSA Rocket 3. Now, did that old BSA Rocket 3 sound good or what? I think these BSA Rocket 3s had a Triumph triple engine in them, and not a BSA engine, but anyway, another bit of trivia for you there. Okay, next up we're going to try and fire up this beautiful HIS. Okay, next up for a start up we have this Italian made Air Macchi. Now, I don't know too much about this bike, but it sounds absolutely superb. Now, Okey is in the best traditions of making these video clips. We've saved the best until last. Now, we did show you an imitation of an MV Agusta earlier on in this video, but this baby here is the real McCoy, an absolutely gorgeous Italian made MV Agusta with a proper MV 4-cylinder motor. Now, this bike sounds absolutely superb, so we're going to get this bike's owner to get this bike onto the rolling road, and let's get her fired up. So I hope you enjoyed that there. That's a beautiful MV Agusta firing up. Now this picture here is some of the riders who used to take part in this Beveridge Park race event from back in the day. Now you may recognise one or two of the faces. I certainly recognise Alan Duffus in there, the bike dealer from Kirkcaldy, but these are just some of the faces that raced around this Beveridge Park circuit back in the day. And so I hope you enjoyed all the sights and the sounds from this Bikes in the Park 2016 event. And once again, thank you for watching, and we'll speak again very soon.